Grammatical gender, or noun class, is a property of nouns in many languages. In these languages, each noun belongs to one of several classes or genders, and this class changes the form of other words in the sentence. Here's a basic example from a language that many people will be somewhat familiar with, French. To say the boy is small, we say le garçon est petit. To say the girl is small, la fille est petite. The forms of the article, le or la, and the adjective, petit or petite, change based on whether the noun is masculine or feminine. This doesn't just apply to people. All nouns in French are classified as either masculine or feminine. This assignment is arbitrary and is not based on any properties of the nouns. So when talking about a building, the masculine form is used, le bâtiment est petit. But when talking about a house, the feminine form is used, la maison est petite. The categories that nouns are divided into vary between different languages. They may be masculine and feminine, as in French, which is also found in most of the other Romance languages. They may be masculine, feminine, and neuter, as found in Latin, German, or Russian. They may be masculine, feminine, and two or more other categories, as found in several Caucasian languages, like Chechen or Tsez. Or they may be divided into categories not relating to human genders, like animate and inanimate, as found in Ojibwe or Cree, or into any other combination of categories, really, as in Swahili, which has 8 distinct categories, including, among others, a category for humans, a category for plants, and a category for man-made objects. Generally, the term gender is used when the system has some sort of distinction between masculine and feminine, and the term noun class is used when there is no such distinction. But functionally, there's no difference between these two things, and I'll be using both terms interchangeably throughout the rest of this video. About 44% of languages have some sort of grammatical gender. Gender is particularly common among Indo-European languages, English being unusual for being an Indo-European language without gender, as well as Afro-Asiatic and Niger-Congo languages, although it's also found in other language families all over the world. Languages vary in what words are affected. Pronouns and determiners are almost always affected by gender, with adjectives and verbs also very commonly affected. But gender can also be expressed in numbers, adverbs, particles, or any other type of word. It may affect just one or two words in a sentence, or it may affect every single word in a sentence. Consider these two similar sentences in Swahili. Those two big people fell down. Watu wale wawili wakubwa walianguka. Those two big books fell down. Vitabu vile viwili vikubwa vilianguka. Every word in the sentence, determiner, number, adjective, and verb, changes based on the gender of the noun. Languages also vary to the degree in which gender is marked on the noun itself, if at all. At one extreme you have languages like the Bantu languages, of which Swahili is a member, in which every noun class has a characteristic prefix, and all nouns of that class have that prefix. Thus you can usually tell just by looking at a word which class it belongs to. On the other hand, you have languages like Chechen, where the form of a noun gives no indication of which class it belongs to at all, and you just have to learn the class of each new noun you encounter. Most languages fall somewhere in the middle, where there are certain patterns, but these patterns don't apply to all nouns, or they have some exceptions. In Spanish, nouns ending in O are usually masculine, but there are also a few feminine nouns that have this ending. In some languages, the gender of nouns is determined entirely by the properties of the object it refers to. Tamil is an example of this kind of language. Nouns are divided into rational and irrational. Rational nouns are humans and deities, which are further subdivided into masculine and feminine based on their actual gender, and all other nouns are irrational. Gender assignment may also be partly arbitrary, with some nouns assigned to a gender based on their actual properties, and others assigned to a gender for no particular reason. This is the case in most European languages, where words for men are typically masculine and words for women are typically feminine, but other words are arbitrarily assigned to a gender, and a word's gender has no connection to its meaning. Another example is Ojibwe, which has an animate-inanimate distinction. As you would expect, all words for humans and animals belong to the animate gender, but not all non-living things belong to the inanimate gender, and instead they are arbitrarily assigned to either animate or inanimate. I couldn't find an example of a gender system where all assignments are arbitrary, but in principle there's no reason why such a system could not exist. Why does gender exist? Well, it's important to note that language features don't need a reason to exist. Sometimes they exist just because they exist. However, gender can be useful in some situations when it comes to disambiguation. When talking about two or more different nouns with different genders, speakers can just use the gendered pronoun to make it clear which one is intended without having to repeat the noun over and over. Obviously, this doesn't work if two nouns happen to have the same gender, but it works often enough that gender can be useful to have. Furthermore, gender can help to distinguish between homophones. In German, the word kiwi can mean the kiwi bird or kiwi fruit. The difference is, when referring to a bird, it takes the masculine gender, and when referring to kiwi fruit, it takes feminine gender. Gender can also help clarify words that aren't quite homophones but sound similar. If a listener is having trouble hearing for some reason, then the gender can help them to narrow down what the speaker may have said. What gender is not? Grammatical gender is not necessarily related to natural gender. Roughly 3/4 of languages with gender systems make some kind of distinction between masculine and feminine, but that still means about a quarter don't. It's worth noting that the term gender comes from the Latin word genus, which simply means type, the same root as the word genre. The grammatical meaning of gender is the older one, and the meaning of male versus female is newer, and comes from the fact that gender systems in most European languages distinguish male and female. Even in languages that do make a masculine-feminine distinction, the relationship between grammatical gender and natural gender is not exact. For words referring to humans, the grammatical gender usually coincides with the natural gender, but there are often exceptions. One well-known and often cited example is from German, in which the word girl, Mädchen, is grammatically neuter because it is a diminutive, and all diminutives are neuter in German. Another example, the French word personne, or person, is grammatically feminine even if it refers to a man. Some people go so far as to try to claim that there is no connection at all between grammatical gender and natural gender. This is demonstrably not true in many languages. In French, the pronouns and adjectives used for male humans are the same as for grammatically masculine objects, and the pronouns and adjectives used for female humans are the same as for grammatically feminine objects. A French man would say, "Je suis français," using the masculine form of the adjective, while a French woman would say, "Je suis française," using the feminine form. This clearly demonstrates that there is a connection between grammatical gender and natural gender. It's just not necessarily one-to-one in all situations. The other thing that gender is not declension classes. In other words, gender is more than just differences in how different nouns change their form. I've seen several people claim that Basque has a grammatical gender system that distinguishes between animate and inanimate, but it really doesn't. Certain case endings are different depending on whether a noun is animate or inanimate, but this is not a true gender system on its own. The key point of gender is agreement, which is some other part of a sentence must change based on noun gender. As no other part of the Basque sentence changes, this animate-inanimate distinction is not really gender. In a similar way, it's fairly common for animate and inanimate nouns to be treated differently with respect to marking of plurals. In quite a few languages, plural marking is mandatory on animate nouns, but optional on inanimate nouns. In other languages, only animate nouns may take a plural form at all. Once again, this by itself is not enough to say that a language has grammatical gender. if other parts of the sentence don't change their form to agree with the noun. An idea that is similar to grammatical gender is the concept of noun classifiers, also called measure words. These are most frequently found in languages in East and Southeast Asia. In these systems, numbers and often determiners cannot directly modify nouns, but must be combined with a measure word, or classifier. In Mandarin, 3 is san, and cat is mao, but 3 cats is not san mao. In fact, it's san zhi mao, where zhi is a measure word used with cats and certain other animals. Depending on the language, these classifiers may also be used with determiners. So this cat is zhi jie mao. If you want to talk about something else, then you have to use a different classifier. 3 books, san ben shu. This is very similar to how uncountable nouns are treated in English. In English, you can't say 3 rices because rice is an uncountable noun. You have to say something like 3 grains of rice. Likewise, you generally don't say 3 papers, but 3 sheets of paper. In languages with noun classifiers, all nouns work like this. The core difference between genders and noun classifiers is the strictness of agreement required. In gender systems, each noun has only one gender, but with noun classifiers, nouns may be able to take multiple different classifiers in different situations. It's especially common for a larger variety of more specific classifiers to be used in more formal speech compared to informal speech, while gender remains the same between formal and informal speech. There is also typically a generic classifier that can be used for any word when the speaker forgets the more specific classifier, or if it isn't clear which classifier is the most suitable. In Mandarin, this is ge, so one could also say san, ge, mao. Gender systems do not have a default gender that can be used when the speaker's unsure which gender to use. They simply have to guess and hope that they get it correct. There are other differences that typically occur between noun classifiers and noun classes, but these don't actually define the difference, they're just common distinctions. First of all, classifiers are typically much more numerous than genders. It's uncommon for a language to have more than 5 genders, and very rare for a language to have more than 10. But when it comes to classifiers, it's common for languages to have dozens or even hundreds. The other common difference is that noun classifiers typically have a clear etymological meaning on their own, while gender markers don't. In the Chinese example, the generic ge classifier means individual. On the other hand, the common Latin feminine marker, a, does not have any meaning other than marking feminine gender. The degree to which grammatical gender influences speaker perceptions of the world, or if it even does at all, is highly debated. A famous and widely cited study compared German speakers and Spanish speakers asked to describe different objects where the grammatical gender differed between the languages. For example, bridge is masculine in Spanish and feminine in German. They found that Spanish speakers were more likely to use, quote, masculine adjectives like strong or dangerous, while German speakers were more likely to use, quote, feminine adjectives like elegant or slender. Other researchers have attempted to replicate this result and failed, so make of that what you will. Other studies have, however, found that speakers do associate inanimate objects with their grammatical gender to some degree. In one study, participants were tasked with assigning either male or female voices to characters in a movie in which animals and inanimate objects speak. The study compared French and Polish speakers, and the objects were specifically chosen because their grammatical gender was different between these two languages. The results showed that participants were much more likely to assign a voice matching the grammatical gender of the object in their language. These studies do seem to be fairly consistently replicated, but it's unclear what this actually means in terms of how speakers perceive these objects. So yeah, that's about it. That's my video on gender. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.